So, first meeting, speech and debate.
There's so many people here, you're missing out. I just put duct tape over their mouth so they couldn't say anything.
Excellent. Well, yeah. It's whatever. I'm sure they'll all filter in at some point. So first, who am I? Which is basically about establishing credibility. I'm not just some random guy who does this for fun. I actually did this as professionally as it's possible to do this. So I have almost a decade of experience in forensics. I started at LCC as a competitor. I took home national awards, actually 4 of them. 2 of them in debate, 1 in extemp, and 1 in impromptu. After that, I was the student assistant coach for Dan Shabbat, who was for a time the coach there, and then after that, I was the official assistant director of forensics, which was a paid faculty position. So when I say that I'm knowledgeable about this, understand that I'm not bullshitting you, genuinely am.
Forensics as
Yes. So
crime scene shit?
Forensics is just another word for speech and debate. It comes from it's either Greek or Latin, but the word forum, which is basically just a gathering place to speak. Yeah, I'm not sure why we don't call it something more sensible that doesn't have other meanings, but whatever. So disclaimers. First of all, this isn't a class, though it does kind of feel like a class. There are lectures, there's homework, there's projects, there's even something akin to a final. What's up?
Sorry. I didn't know where it was. I was like, I've heard of this building, maybe not. I had to ask, and I asked Scott.
Right. It's my building. Mostly I just wanted it for the projector. I didn't know where else has the fancy presenting equipment. I was also hoping to record us, but instead I have to do it on my shitty laptop.
Okay.
Michael and Bula's coming.
Are they? Wow, they can eat here, but whatever. So all you guys missed was me talking about my history and how I did this professionally. What I was just saying is that this kind of seems like a class. We have homework, we have lectures, we have projects, we even have something really similar to a final, except that our final involves trophies and alcohol. So much, much cooler than any other final you've ever done. But this still isn't really a class. So during lectures, you guys are allowed to talk amongst yourselves. I'm not like other people. If you interrupt me, I don't give a fuck.
Do we get graded?
No.
You get trophies?
No, not at all.
That's
Well,
trophies and
so at tournaments, you kind of get graded. Basically, you will have ballots that you'll get back that say these are the things that you can improve on, these are the things that you did well, the things that you can do better, stuff like that. And that's just, it's feedback so that you do better in your next tournament.
Okay.
It doesn't really affect anything outside of this space. The next one is that debate is complicated, and really what I'm trying to say is, if you feel confused, if you have questions, if you are hopelessly lost, that's absolutely normal. We all were there at some point. There are still parts of debate that I don't understand, and I'll tell you when that's the case. But don't give up just because it's confusing. I mean, if everyone gave up because it was confusing, no one would do this, because it's complicated. Also, politics is complicated. Are any of you poli-sci majors by any chance? No? So if I talk about something that you don't understand politically, that's totally fine. When I started this, I didn't know a damn thing about politics. I knew that we had a government and it did things, and that was about the extent.
That's kind of how I feel, and I shouldn't be like that because my husband is in the military, and I'm just like, are you going to get paid, or are they going to all vote for you not to get paid this month? So.
Yeah, honestly, outside of this space, it doesn't affect people's daily lives, so I'm totally understanding if you guys don't know these things.
Okay.
I will personally admit that there's a shit ton about politics that I don't know. Most of the time, I'm bullshitting it. And I won't tell you when those times are, because I like sounding smart. And the last one is...
Can we call you on it if we...
You absolutely can. Yes.
I don't know why you even asked. You're going to.
Yeah, no. Please do.
I was like, Abby, I'll just do it. So.
Yeah, probably in the most embarrassing way possible. I'm alright with that. The last one is that I'm biased as fuck.
I was just going to ask, I was like, so what is that? You're biased?
So first of all, I am biased politically. You guys already know that I have a strong, really noticeable preference for socialism. I'm never going to apologize for that. I'm going to advocate for those policies, and that's just the way that it is. If you disagree with me, I'm absolutely thrilled to talk about it outside of this space and time. and explain to you why you're wrong, but here we got other things we got to do. The other thing that I'm biased about is debate structure. I disagree with a lot of the community about a lot of things, which is what I was explaining to Abby before you guys showed up. I'm not going to tell you when those times are usually, because the way that I do things is more akin to an older style that I much prefer, I think is better, and I think that we need to move more towards. A lot of the debate community disagrees, and you'll see those in your rounds. You don't need me to tell you when those times are.
So what's the okay? So you like the older
style.
Yeah. So what's the difference?
Very complicated to explain.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to say some words right now that you aren't going to completely understand, but as you get more accustomed to the debate format, you'll understand better. I come from a very policy-oriented school of debate, and right now the entire community is moving more towards a values-oriented style of debate.
I know, I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there are implications that go along with that, like how arguments are formed, how you refute arguments, basically the entire structure of the debate. So a quick overview. What we are all about is preparing debates, preparing speeches, researching, and then going to tournaments and kicking ass. And I know that sounds a little bit intimidating, but honestly, it's really just like a friendly competition. It's like any other sporting event, really. If like you're going to form friendships with the people that you are interacting with on a daily basis, but in round, you're all about kicking their asses. I'm sorry, there should have been another disclosure. The community has like a lot of swear words. That's where I picked up cussing like a sailor. So if that offends you, I'm sorry, I can't stop.
Oh, debate has a lot of swear words?
Not the debate rounds themselves, but the community outside of rounds does. And it's a really bad habit. I understand that.
So it's like another day in the STC, right?
Yeah, like,
Basically, yeah. But more.
So just like every day.
Much more.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's not appropriate for an academic setting. They don't give a shit though. So.
Well, I like to say cuss words. So.
Yeah. Well, then you'll fit right in. So debates. We're jumping into like the most complicated part of the entire community, and that is debate structure. And the reason for that is because it is the most complicated. It takes a long time to get used to. For probably the first entire year of competition, on your ballots, you're going to see a note that says you need to work on organization and you need to work on structure. And there's no amount of practice is going to change that right away. Like, it's a thing that takes a long amount of time to get over. And that's why we started right now. It is intimidating. It is complex. If you have a question, feel free to blurt it out. But really, it's a matter of jumping in and getting used to it right away. So, first I'm going to explain the structure through an example round, or through an example case that I wrote here. And then we're going to work on one together, and then you guys are going to work on one on your own. So this structure, or the way that this is laid out, is not the way that you're going to write it down when you're forming your own. This is laid out in this particular way so that you can see it clearly and see what's going on. When you actually write these cases, they're going to be much more compact. You're going to develop your own shorthand, and you're going to be able to, like, all of these subpoints right here, you're going to be able to condense these down to like 1 or 2 words, and since you wrote it, you're going to know what it means. But that's just, it's written out this way so that you can see exactly what's happening underneath. So at the very top right here where it says the USFG should make a significant investment in nuclear energy, that's called a resolution, and that's basically the topic that you're going to be discussing in the round. And that's decided about 20 to 30 minutes before the round starts. So, USFG is shorthand for United States federal government, in case you didn't know. Some people don't. So, at the very, very top of every single case is something called resolutional analysis. And it is the single most important part of the round. Now, sometimes it can amount to 1 or 2 words. Other times it takes up the time of the entire round, and it goes on and on and on. But that's because it is the single most important part. That's where you define what is going to be talked about in the round. So in resolutional analysis, we talk about definitions. In this case, most of them are contextually defined. Like, we all know what investment means. We all know what nuclear energy means. We know what the federal government is. The only thing that we decided to define here is significant, and that's because at some point probably someone's going to say, well, this isn't actually a significant investment, it's just an investment. And so we decided to define it as sufficiently great or important to be worthy of attention or noteworthy. That comes from Google when you type in define significant. But Google pulls all of their definitions from the Oxford English Dictionary. You guys are so late and you missed so much.
We missed
Damn. Get your lives together.
fries.
So the next part of resolutional analysis is what's called the weighing mechanism, and it is the most important part of resolutional analysis. It's the most important part of the most important part of the round. And basically what that does is it tells the judge how they should judge the round. Like, what is it that we are measuring this by? What is the metric that we use to decide this round? In this instance, what we're using is a criteria, which is net benefits. And basically that means whichever side of the round has the most amount of benefits is going to win. And like, that seems really straightforward. It doesn't feel like it needs to be said, but if you don't define it, your opponent does get to define it, and they're going to be shitty about it. And like, when they're shitty about it, they win. So after that comes harms. Actually, after that comes basically the rest of the case, and the way that I want you guys to think about this is you're solving a problem, right? And you go through the normal steps that you would go through in solving any other problem. So when you're solving a problem, the first thing that you do is identify exactly what's wrong. And that's what the harms is. The harms is saying, what issues are we trying to fix right now? What problems are we addressing? So we have two harms. The first is dependence on foreign oil. The A, B, and C, it says brink link impact. Ignore those words. You don't need to know what they mean right now. But basically, up here is what's happening right now. The U.S. imports about 10.1 million barrels of oil per day. That's from the Energy Information Administration in 2017. Only about 1% of U.S. energy is generated with oil directly. That comes from the World Bank in 2015. Most of the oil that we import is actually used to produce gasoline to fuel cars. And the current strain and high price of standalone energy stands as an impediment to electric vehicle adoption. So basically what I'm saying is we import a shit ton of oil. That oil isn't actually used directly to generate energy. Instead, it's used to power cars. But the way that we produce energy stops us from adopting electric vehicles. So the link is, ignore what the link is, but basically it's saying this model allows foreign powers to control a significant portion of the U.S. economy. And then we get to the impact, and that is kind of the meat of the argument. Like, how is this a bad thing? Why do we care? And the first is that foreign powers with which we are at odds, politically, ideologically, etc., so basically Saudi Arabia and other OPEC nations, they're able to temper the U.S. economic growth. And they may at some point end oil sales to the U.S., which causes an economic collapse, and we can terminalize that through resource wars. Basically, we can say, like, we're going to rack up a body count as a result of this. Which isn't something we do a whole lot, just because it's kind of a shitty way to do it. If you guys have questions, by the way, feel free to blurt them out. The next issue that we want to solve, or the next harm, is global warming. And I don't feel like I need to talk about this a shit ton. Basically what's happening now is the vast majority of U.S. energy is generated through coal and natural gas. Burning those things creates a shit ton of greenhouse gases like CO2. And scientists agree that we're approaching a point where we're going to be unable to reverse the effects of global warming. And they mostly say that that's going to happen in 2020, give or take a few years. Energy production through coal and natural gas are decreasing, but not fast enough to reach the 2020 benchmark that scientists say we need to meet. And then we have already seen 1.4 degrees increase in global temperature since 1880. Yeah.
Like, so, if you're doing debate, like, up front, like, do you get marked down for, like, cursing?
Yes.
Oh, never mind then.
Well, depending on the format. In this format, yes.
Right.
In another format that we may at some point pick up, they don't really care. They got other things to worry about.
But you had said, I mean, like if you're going, well, the vast majority of U.S. energy is a bunch of bullshit. And I mean, yeah, but I mean, if you're like arguing, right, and somebody's saying something and you're like, that's bullshit.
Yeah, I feel like
you know?
I do that, like, automatically, I'm like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
I say that again, I'm like, oh, shit.
Yes, you will get in a lot of trouble for that.
Natural gas fucking blows. You're all ripping everybody off, you sons of bitches. Yeah.
I wish, yeah. So one of the things that you're going to learn really, really fast is that you have to treat your audience like they're idiots. Because
that'd
like
be easy.
you have to spell these things out for people. If you don't spell them out, then your opponents are going to say, well, you didn't address this point, that point, or the other point. And you're like, well, don't be a fucking moron. You know what I'm trying to say. But yeah, so unfortunately you can't just be like, no, that's bullshit, you're wrong. You actually have to explain exactly why they're wrong.
Humans are sluts for gas.
Basically, yeah. And so the impact, the why do we care? We have rising sea levels, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes. Basically what that amounts to is we've already seen the first deaths from global warming. I mean, you can just point to Katrina and be like, hey, these were deaths caused directly by global warming. The body count is only going to increase as we wait to address this.
And we can ad lib, right, to these little key points, like find something. Now, are we allowed to have paper and stuff up there? Okay.
Yeah. So what
like
you will
note cards
have are a lot of schools hand out like pre-made flow paper. I think that's kind of shitty, and I think it doesn't give you guys as much credit as it should. Instead, you guys will have like these things, and you'll develop your own flows, and like you'll be able to write down all the arguments.
Just one question, like, so when you talk to me in this format, like, do you get dogged down for like breaking apart and like, I guess like even asking like rhetorical questions to the people? Because sometimes, for example, like if you like, you know, like, do any of you remember this, and like, do you guys remember how horrific it was, and like this could happen again, and like, do you get dogged down for stuff like that? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, that leaves a bigger impact on like the people when you put them in position.
The way that this structure is formed makes it seem very rigid, like you have to read every single line and every single word. That's not the case. The only reason it's written out like this is so that you guys see exactly what I'm trying to communicate. If I were actually communicating this, it would be much more rhetorical and a lot less structured. This is a rhetorical, persuasive event. Your job is to persuade the judge. So any rhetorical devices you can use to make that happen, you should absolutely employ.
And online, like, is there videos of like debates that actually happen, like teaching debates? Like, I feel like it's helpful to see like debates actually go.
Yeah, there is on YouTube.
Is there?
Yes, they're not good.
Oh, they're
well,
not?
Like, I think we could go through it maybe one time and next week, like break it down.
Yes.
Say
Yeah.
what they did.
I'm actually planning an example round
Okay.
that I should have recorded probably next week.
Oh, cool.
If everything works out, and I was going to send that around. I was hoping to have it done today or to have a couple experienced people here so that we could make that happen, but I couldn't get it organized.
That would be awesome if we could see that
Yeah.
too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it helps to break it down.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Really, like,
Yeah.
understand it.
And it kind of gives you an idea of what you're up against or
Yeah,
what you're going to.
Absolutely. And there is significant value in that, as well as in practicing the format itself. I just want you guys to like know what you're looking out for when you watch those rounds is all.
Okay.
Yeah. It's much more fun than this structure makes it sound, I promise.
But we have to stay within the structure, right?
Yes, generally.
Okay.
So every single thing that I say, there's going to be an exception to. And that's the crazy thing about debate, is that there are no hard and fast rules except for one, and that one hard and fast rule is that resolutional analysis is the most important part of the round. That is the only thing that there is no exception to in debate. Everything else, I mean, take it with a grain of salt, understand that there are going to be instances when I'm wrong. So once we've talked about what's wrong, what problems we need to solve, we need to talk about, like any other problem-solving situation, we need to talk about exactly how we're going to solve it. And that's done through what's called a plan. Plan has 4 parts. You don't need to worry about what those parts are now, even though they're written up there. If you want to write those down, that's cool. But basically, Congress is going to direct $6 billion towards the Department of Energy for research and development for a commercially viable liquid fluoride thorium reactor. That sounds really complicated, but all you really need to understand is that Congress is going to put $6 billion towards the development of nuclear energy. That's really all you need to understand there. One of the big questions that we have to discuss in debate is how the fuck are we going to pay for this? Because like $6 billion is a lot of money. I don't have $6 billion. I don't know about you guys.
Well, especially since we're in debt too. So.
Right, we're in massive debt.
Yeah.
One of the really, really easy targets for funding is the military budget because it is bloated and running away from us and just like we have planes that they didn't ask for that blow up on landing. We have a fucking ski lodge that we operate in Sweden. Like, anytime you need money, feel free to cut the military budget.
1% is $6 billion?
Yes. Yeah. I know, right? Yeah, it's a massive amount, but we're going to cut the military budget by 1% to pay for this, and then enforcement is basically who's going to oversee this project, and that's going to be the Department of Energy. And those 4 parts have to be in every single plan. You don't need to worry about those right now, because it gets a little bit more complicated.
Are you going to be able to email this to us?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. The only thing is that if this resolution comes up at a tournament, you cannot use this. You have to rewrite the case.
Oh,
Yeah, because otherwise I basically wrote the case for you, and that's cheating. Which no one else will know but us, but I feel like it's a shitty thing to do. So, like any other problem-solving situation, after you've decided how you're going to solve the problem, you have to decide if it is actually going to solve the problem, and that happens in the solvency section. And basically what you're doing here is you go back to the problems you're trying to solve, and you say, are these solved by this plan? So dependence on foreign oil, it's going to have a minimal impact on direct generation from oil because we just don't generate that much power from oil. But it's going to incentivize and ease the transition towards electric vehicles. And then global warming, nuclear power is a clean energy. It only emits water vapor, and the waste is just, it's inert thorium. It's a rock, basically. So after solvency, we talk about the other cool shit that we're going to do as a result of this. Oh, excuse me. And that happens in the advantages. And without advantages, so the other name for advantages is benefits. And that creates a parity between this section and the weighing mechanism. So when we talk about who has the most benefits, if you rename this section benefits, then it's really, really clear to see that like you have more benefits on your side. So this is basically where you win the round. This is where you say, not only do we solve the problem, but we get a whole bunch of other cool shit also. Yeah.
What's thorium?
Thorium is, it's basically a rock. Like, you can find it in basically any alley. But it is a radioactive element. I'm not a nuclear engineer. Just gonna throw that out there.
Thorium is much less, like, depending on like the isotope, it's not as like radioactive as like something like it's lead. Lead
Oh,
probably do most.
excuse me. Wow.
Yeah, but basically it's a nuclear element that you are able to generate power from.
Because it says water is just thorium, which is inert when not used in power production. So
Well,
it
that's
just.
waste, isn't water? I think water was just the instrument, the vapor.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So we have 5 advantages, which is a lot. If I were doing this round, I would have cut out the first 3 because that's a lot of talking that I don't want to do. But first, the first argument is that it's safe, and this is really to argue against what the neg is basically going to say, which is that it's not safe. Nuclear power is inherently unsafe. But thorium itself is particularly safe, and nuclear power in general is also very safe. Like, we just generally don't have problems with it.
So on debate, are you going to, is everybody required to speak, like if we're at a tournament, is everyone required to speak, or is there certain topics that, like, Bola seems like he understands science pretty good. What was that?
Oh, no, I was just laughing.
Oh, yeah, because I mean, you knew what thorium was. I'm an English like major. I don't even know what the hell that word was. But I mean, so if some person is more, experienced, or they have more knowledge about something, would they be the ones that would be arguing, or is it just everyone just to learn the same thing and then just go with? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
It's a mixture of both. And the place where that happens is what's called strike, which I'll talk about in just a minute.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, real quick, just to get through the advantages. The other advantage is that it's cheap. Thorium's fucking everywhere. We have a shit ton in dry casks already because we thought we were going to build these things, and then we ended up not building them for whatever reason. So we mined a shit ton and then stored it and just never did anything with it. It's compact. You can fit one in your backyard. So I'll send you a video about it, but basically traditional nuclear power requires like a really big pressurized building to store the vapor. Thorium reactors don't. National security, basically inert thorium waste can't be used to create a dirty bomb. So like if you're transporting nuclear waste from these reactors, if they fall into terrorist hands, they can't do anything with them. As well as the fact that like we can give these to rogue nations and they can't build bombs out of them. And then finally, space exploration. This was originally designed by NASA so that they could put a moon base, basically. And we can use that as a jumping off point to spur more space exploration. So there's a lot of details in this. So that's the entire debate case. There's a lot of details in this, but what I really want you guys to get from this are the major sections. All right, so there is the single most important part of every single round, resolutional analysis. You always, always, always have to have resolutional analysis. If you skip resolutional analysis, you've lost the round, okay? The next major section is harms. You should have harms. If you skip the harms, you don't automatically lose, but it's not a great situation. The next major section after that is plan. Again, if you skip the plan, if you say that the plan is inherent in the resolution, that's fine. I'm annoyed with you, but you're not going to immediately lose the round. The next major section is solvency, which is where you say this is how we solve the problem. The vast majority of people skip solvency, right? Most people just assume solvency. And that's fine. Again, I'm annoyed with you, but it's whatever, it happens. And finally, advantages. Advantages are both really important and not all that important. They're really important because they help you win the round, but if you skip them, you're not in a bad situation at all. Like, you just skipped advantages, and that's totally fine. And I'm not even that annoyed with you, because advantages are hard. Yeah.
But do you think you're successful? You probably don't skip any of these, though, correct?
I never skip any of these.
So that's probably why you're so successful with your debates.
Yeah.
Okay.
On the other hand, all of these take time. You have a very limited amount of time to cover these things. And so managing that time is really important. So if you decide to skip solvency to save time, I understand. Like, I've been there. I've done that. Yeah. I mean, you just gotta use your time wisely. It's also really important that you guys not try to prep these in order, because you'll spend basically the entire time focusing on RA, resolutional analysis, when really you should be focusing on plan and advantages. So, but we'll work out those strategies as we go. So, those are the major sections. Those are what you need to have an affirmative round. Okay. So now let's talk about the format itself, which is kind of weird, takes some getting used to. But the format that we do is called IPDA, which stands for International Public Debate Association. And it was created as a response to NPDA, which is the National Parliamentary Debate Association. Basically, the NPDA format is super complex. It takes a shit ton of time and resources to get used to, and this was basically like, hey, we don't want to dedicate that much time and energy to it, so we're going to simplify things. So the way that IPDA works, I'm going to go to the next page, don't mind me. So there's a 5-minute speech, which is called the AF constructive, and that's what we just covered. So everything that we just talked about would be in an AF constructive speech, and that's basically where you set out the case that you're going to discuss today. The next section is a 2-minute section, and that's called cross-X. And basically what happens there is the negation stands up and they ask the affirmation questions about their case. To begin with, you guys are going to be asking clarifying questions, and as novices, that's totally fine. As you progress, those questions need to move away from being clarifying questions and more towards being gotcha questions. Right, so basically saying, like finding holes in the case, moving away from what was your argument here and more, is this actually a sound argument? The next section is 6 minutes, and that's called the neg constructive. The neg constructive is a lot simpler than the AF constructive. I'm not going to talk about exactly what it consists of, because that's more information than I want you guys to handle today, because this is already a lot. But basically, you respond to this case, and then you talk about your own arguments in that speech. The next is another constructive. It's another cross-X rather, and that's the AF cross-X. And it's the same thing as the neg cross-X. AF stands up, they ask the neg questions.
Just a clarification on the vocabulary. What is AF? What is neg?
Oh, I'm sorry. AF is affirmative, and that is the person who's affirming the resolution. So the resolution in this instance was what? The USFG. The USFG should make a significant investment in nuclear energy. So the affirmation is the person that's saying, yes, the USFG should make that investment. The neg is the negation, and they're saying, no, the USFG shouldn't make that investment.
So, like, when we come into a debate, we know that, like, we are given how to do it, right?
Yep.
Like if we go against or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's decided like 20 to 30 minutes beforehand.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like we were giving a topic, and then when we come to it, we were given the way that we're gonna.
Kind of. I'll explain in 1 minute.
Alright.
Okay. So the next speech is 3 minutes long, and that is That is the AF. Sorry, it's been a while since I've done this one. So that's an AF rebuttal, and that's basically where the AF gets to talk about next case and prove why they're wrong. The next speech is 5 minutes. That's the neg rebuttal. Same thing, except on the opposite side.
Why do they get different times?
Because immediately after that is another 3-minute speech, and that's the AF rebuttal again. The reason for that is because the AF has a significant burden of proof, right? So neg doesn't actually have that many burdens. Neg has to show up and say, no, you're wrong. AF has to show up and say, here's all of the things, and here's why they're true, and here's all of my evidence for it. There's a lot more work to do on the AF. So they actually have the same amount of time overall, but they split the AF rebuttal in two because they need more time to prove their case. And I know the 3-minute speeches are shitty. I hate them. They are a pain in the ass. You never get everything on the flow that you need to do. Like, you never say as much as you need to say. But, I mean, it's the fairest way to do it, unfortunately, in this format. So, that's the entire round. After this, your judge, circles one of the names on the ballot, they write their feedback, and then you're done. So the question has come up a few times, how were topics chosen? And the way that works is you are given 5 topics, so 20 to 30 minutes beforehand, you check a piece of paper on the wall and it tells you which side you're going to be on, which room you're in, who your judge is, and who you're debating. And then you go to what's called draw, which is also interchangeable with the word strike for some reason. And basically what happens is they give you a slip of paper with 5 topics on it. The neg takes their turn to cross out one of the topics, and then the AF, and then the neg, until you arrive at just one topic. And there is a particular strategy that goes along with that, but again, that's more information that I want to give you guys right now, especially because it depends on a lot more complex stuff. But that's the format. Does all that make sense? There's no questions about how it goes or anything like that?
No, what's the...
Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
So, the first part you told us is that, so I'm confused.
That's normal.
So the first part, is like this, whoever's speaking, do they do that part first and then you do this part?
How do you
Is
mean?
that just a plan?
Like if...
That format that you have,
Mhm.
is that just like for ourselves, for doing this part?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the actual like route. This is what
Yes.
you do in a route.
Yeah, so that format that I told you about up there, that's just this section right here. Right? So during the AF constructive, that's where you go over everything that we talked about in that first part. That's where you go over RA, harms, plan, solvency, and advantages. In that order, and always with RA. Never forget RA.
And then the rest of it is just all the stuff that comes after.
Yeah.
So the opposing team will come back and give their rebuttal on that. And then now do they do that for 2 minutes and then we do it for 2 minutes?
No, so the cross-X is that questioning part. That's where they
Okay.
stand up and they ask you questions. And then they go into their argumentation after that first 6 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a structure to that as well. They'll first talk about their arguments, like arguments that they wrote outside of round. And then they'll talk about your arguments and say, here's why you're wrong on these points. And there's, again, a structure to all of those. We love structure in debate. Structure is awesome. But there's structure inside of structure inside of structure, and you'll learn it all as you get used to it.
And then what's the dress? Is it like business dress?
Business
or?
casual.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. Guys, if you wear slacks and a button-up, that's cool. Ladies, you have a shit ton more options. I'm not gonna lie to you. There is a significant amount of sexism in the debate community.
Can we get polos or anything?
Possibly. It's not like normal dress.
Oh,
but
gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
A lot of teams have like T-shirts that they'll wear to like finals, or not finals, but
Opening?
awards. That's the
Gotcha.
word. Yeah. just to rep their team.
So when you say sexism,
They're
more if you wear a dress.
so if I wore a mini skirt, do you think we'd win, or is that what you're talking about?
it's more that if you wore pants, you would probably get a comment on your ballot saying women shouldn't wear pants.
Really?
Yeah,
Kind of.
it's fucked up. I don't give a shit about what judges say. If they write that on your ballot, I will go and I will talk to them personally. Like, I don't care about making enemies in the debate community. I've been in it for almost a decade now. I will tell them what's what.
Well, is there a dress code for
No.
women specifically?
Not remotely.
But
You
they're-
guys
are they
can
still
show
living
up
in the
in t-shirts
40s or
and
what?
pants.
Like, I mean, wouldn't that be like voter bias? Because like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
dressed like that, they're gonna like,
It
well,
is.
before you even start, they're gonna be like, oh, she's probably skimpy, so like, fuck everything she says.
And I'm pretty
Yes.
sure that's discrimination, and it's probably
It
against
is.
the law. So
I don't know about the law, but
No?
I know that it is generally a fucked up thing. I've never known a woman in the debate community who hasn't gotten some comment on the way that she dresses. And that's shitty. I'm sorry that you guys are going to be exposed to that. That's just the nature of the thing. If it happens, show me your ballots. I will go talk to that person.
so they'll write it on the ballot.
Mhm.
I mean,
just write to a ballot bag and go fuck yourself.
bitch, you want to
That's
meet me
fine.
outside?
I'm fine with that. The other thing that I should mention, since we're talking about it, is there's also a not insignificant amount of racism in the debate community.
Great.
Yeah,
That's what I've been looking forward to.
There you go.
particularly, and I'll show it to you at some point. Particularly, women of color are significantly less likely to make it to finals rounds than white men, basically.
That is affirming.
I know.
The really interesting thing about the sexism and the racism inherent in the debate community is that the debate community skews towards liberalism.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like,
It really, really is.
the whole idea of speech and debate is like to be more open and like bring up topics and be more like liberalistic view.
Yeah.
But it's like run by people who are like exact opposite of everything that they go for, and it's like that is like such a discord.
Right.
It's
Yeah, I
crazy.
really don't understand where it comes from. I know that a lot of judges have like a white savior complex going on. The other thing
Is it because of what's happening right now?
possibly it's a big part of it, but also the other thing is that judges in the debate community love when you call out the debate community for their shit. They absolutely love it. They will vote for it every single time. So like if you point out that your opponent is being sexist or racist, or that judges are sexist or racist, or that the tournament itself is sexist or racist, you won the round.
It's a bunch of old kinky bastards who love getting called
Yeah.
out for the negative shit they do.
Right.
That is
It's
great.
no, it's weird as fuck. It is a weird community. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Like the format is complex and stuff like that. It's not the weirdest thing that you're going to encounter
I don't
though.
like mine.
Well, I like a good fight, so bring it on. You
Yeah.
just got to teach me how to talk where I'm not going to get nervous.
We can do that. I got through that a lot faster than I anticipated. Are there any questions about the format? I know it's really complicated, and it's totally normal to not entirely understand it.
I just want to. Okay, so like the speech and debate, like, so does it run by like? So does it run at the state level, and then like if you get past that, do you go up, or how's it run?
Yeah, where do we
Like,
start?
So at the high school level, the answer to that is yes. At the college level, the answer to that is it's complicated.
oh my gosh.
Yeah. We are automatically by competing at local tournaments, we're automatically part of the Northwest Forensics Association. The Northwest Forensics Conference.
Oh, okay.
And that's just, it's because we end up paying their dues just through attending tournaments. And that is a conference of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and I think part of Northern California, if I'm not mistaken. So it's kind of a regional thing, and that's pretty much every tournament in the area. There is also the American Forensics Association. And then there are national organizations that focus on specific things. So there's the National Independent Events Tournament, or NIET. There's IPDA, which has their own set of rules, NPDA, which has their own set of rules. There's Phi Pi, which is traditionally 2-year colleges. There's Pi Kappa Delta, which is traditionally 4-year universities. But we all compete through all of these things and pay dues and all that shit. So It's complicated. But you'll win trophies from every single one of those organizations.
What's paying a due?
It's just
Is it money or like attendance?
yeah, it's fees for attending.
When researching, do you have to like think about like whether your sources are credible?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I cannot tell you how many times I've written on a ballot that Fox News is not a valid source. It's actually a little depressing.
Actually, the real way you win is by saying your argument is fake news.
I've seen that in round actually, and it really annoys me.
And probably Wikipedia probably wouldn't be a good source.
Generally
either.
not. There are tricks to those things, though. If you look at the sources section on Wikipedia, they generally do have academic sources.
So is it better to have a ton of cited sources so it looks like an overflow?
Not necessarily. So we've gone through sort of a weird shift. When I was debating, sources weren't required. And
That's
then,
so weird.
yeah, it was. I'm not sure exactly why it was that way, but like it was just in normal rounds, it was fine if you didn't cite any sources. But then in finals round, they would generally ask, well, what is your source for that? And then you would say what your source is. Now, just as a matter of course, you cite your sources as you go along. And I'm not sure where that shift came from. I feel like it's kind of largely pointless. But.
So when we're in the argument, we need to say where we got the source from.
Even if it's general knowledge.
Not for general knowledge, no. So, like, if you're talking about the Constitution, you don't need to say, like, well, I got this from the National Archives. Like,
George Washington emailed me along with John Hancock. It's in my junk mail. I'll get it later.
Right, completely unnecessary to do it for that. So, yeah, that's the debate format. Let's write a case real quick.
It's summer, Colton.
Do you think it's possible, like during like if we're having a debate and like we ask like the judge, like we ask them like for example, like, we ask them questions and have them speak, or is that not allowed generally?
There are very specific questions that you're allowed to ask your judges. For instance, as novices, you guys are going to ask fairly often, what is your paradigm? And basically all that means is like, as a judge, what is it that you like to see in a round? And what is it that you don't like to see in a round?
Oh, we can't be like during the day be like, do you think my topic's good, or like do you think this is right?
After the
From
round,
going in the
Hey,
right
is this
direction.
good?
Like to get reassurance as you're going
Okay,
along.
yeah, that's probably not allowed.
Do you still like what I'm saying?
yeah.
Is mine better
Yeah,
than
blink
his?
once if you agree, blink twice if
Yeah.
you think I'm shit.
So can we do the questions with the judges as we go along, or is that usually in the resolution analysis when we're finding out? Like,
How do you mean?
or is there a part of the debate when you're first starting, like where we're going to find out, okay, so what do you expect of us? What do you...
Right before the round starts.
Gotcha.
During the round, though, the only person... So, debate is this weird sort of thing where you're talking to your opponent, but you're not talking to your opponent. Like, you're talking about your opponent to your judge, basically. But other than that, you don't really... In round, you can't ask the judge questions. You can't comment on anything outside of the round or anything like that. It's all very, very controlled in that way. After the round, though, you can ask questions about the round and say, like, how did I do? Or the things I need to improve on, stuff like that. Do you guys have anywhere to be in, like, a half hour? Like, am I going to...
Oh, you're fine. Like I just gotta leave at 12:40.
Okay.
That's when I have
I'm
to leave.
good.
Yeah, I got about 15 minutes.
15 minutes? Okay, that's enough time to write a round.
Really? That's all it takes?
For me.
Once you've been doing it for 10 years, it only
Yeah.
takes-
I know.
It comes to you much, much quicker. Yeah. I need to think of a resolution because I wrote it out beforehand, but I forgot what it was. Oh. So this is going to use slightly different language than the other one that I'm going to explain in just a second. So, this House would impeach the president. This is kind of a weird structure that isn't used a whole lot anymore, specifically the words "this House would." But when you see those words, that means that it's the same structure as the one that we just did. It's a policy round. And the advantage of "this House would" is that you get to define what this House is. So this is...
Sounds like we're fucking Harry Potter.
Right, it is...
I loved it.
There's a really
Slytherin
weird
for
sort of
sure.
arcane lexicon that goes along with debate. So when you see this resolution, what is your first inclination? Like what topic do you think this is dealing with?
The Democratic side. I mean, is that a house?
Election?
Just like the Congress.
Congress?
So you all fell into my trap. And that is you're all thinking about US politics.
Because of the wording.
Right.
House would impeach the president.
Right. And that's totally fine.
Maybe like another country,
Yes, you are allowed to talk about other countries.
revolution would impeach them.
Or just the public, general public, and the
You could do that. You could
Congress
talk
public.
about an impeachment in the public opinion.
Mhm.
When I see this topic, I would probably talk about the Philippines and specifically their House of Representatives impeaching President Duterte just to fuck with my opponent.
Try to.
Okay, so not necessarily because he'll probably think that you're just talking about Trump or
Right.
here in. Oh, okay.
Yep. So that is the advantage to this style of resolution. And that's the power of resolutional analysis, by the way. That's why resolutional analysis is the most important part of the round. When I say that, I'm not just bullshitting you. It defines what you're talking about. So in resolutional analysis, I've already caused the negation to have completely wasted their prep time.
And your whole goal in this is to screw up the other opponent
Right.
and give them something that they're not going to even know what the hell they're talking about.
Sometimes.
Okay.
In this instance, yes, because I'm an asshole.
Okay.
Generally, it's frowned upon to do it that way, but it's a valid interpretation of the resolution because it is written so vaguely. And there are ways to argue against that kind of thing. That they're very advanced arguments that we'll talk about later. For simplicity's sake, let's interpret this the way you guys originally did and talk about President Trump. So, resolutional analysis. Specifically definitions. Is there anything in this resolution that we need to define?
President.
House.
Oh, this house.
All right, let's start at the beginning. This house. How are we defining that?
Oh, I guess we're talking opposite. Congress.
Exactly. Specifically, so because there are multiple Congresses, we want to specify
US
which Congress.
Congress.
So the U.S. Congress. And then, do we need to define impeach, or do we think people know what impeach means?
We should
They're
define it.
dumb, so we
because-
gotta
Yeah.
define impeach.
Just give like a
Otherwise,
generalization of it.
otherwise they might think it's I'm peach.
Yeah. So,
Impeach. Kick the fuck out. Impeach.
And then probably the current president would
Yeah.
be 44th. Is it 43rd?
45th.
45th. Oh gosh.
And we're just going to say Trump. So when I write crit, that's my shorthand for criteria. That's the weighing mechanism, because writing out weighing mechanism takes a lot of time. So how do we want to judge this round? What should be our criteria?
Why president should be impeached?
Basically, yeah. And so this is kind of a trick question because there's really only two valid criteria.
The charges and why.
It is, so I'll just write it.
Is that always kind of like the two criteria?
Like the
Generally,
net
yeah.
benefits.
In this style of round, this is called a policy round. In values and fact rounds, which I'll talk about later, because they're much simpler and easier to explain. In those rounds, you're going to have a different criteria. But generally speaking, for policy rounds, you want your criteria to be net benefits.
So policy rounds are more based on kind of cost-benefit analysis.
Basically, and that's also a valid criteria. A lot of people use that if they specifically want to draw a contrast between the cost and the benefits. So this is more about just what are the good things that we get. Cost-benefit analysis is when you want to say, this is the good things we get, and this is how it compares to the cost. It's specifically when you want to address the issue of cost.
So after explaining it, I guess will we list off a couple of net benefits? Be maybe it would soften our.
Not yet.
No. Not yet.
So the net benefits are actually inherent in the structure that we laid out. And that's through solvency and advantages.
Okay.
So before we get to those, we have to harms, right?
Chaos.
Chaos. That's a good one. What kind of chaos are we talking?
There's I don't know.
Oh no, go ahead.
Just there's been what's all the conflict with other countries?
Very well.
There's lying. He's sexist.
Or the harms of
I feel like
impeaching him.
going
What?
chaos, they probably split up the voters in the U.S. So internally, it'll be a drift swaying voters because the Democratic and
Civil War,
Yeah,
pretty much.
yeah, Civil War. He's
Civil
Public
caused
safety.
yes, public safety.
not civil war just yet. I feel civil conflict. I feel like if it was a civil war, like we've seen what happens in civil wars.
So, one quick note: this has already turned into a really, really dense harm, right? So we have a lot of topics that we're going to talk about in one section. What I would actually recommend is breaking this up into smaller parts. And
Gotcha.
I'll specifically talk about conflict with our allies, right? Because you want, the goal isn't breadth, it's depth, right? You want a deep dive into these arguments. So you want to say, we've already initiated a trade war with China, we're working on a trade war with Canada. Like, we need to talk about the specifics of the harms to our international relations.
Well, also the global impact that it's been having with China and how we are now because of what's going on with the president and just him fighting with everybody constantly.
So let's actually,
I think also what weakens our soft power we currently have. We've had for a while. The countries where like there's respect, but now like like when they think about like a U.S. citizen, like their like ideology is so different because of one person.
Yeah,
So the soft power is gone, not gone, but it's definitely like
it's definitely diminished.
diminished a lot. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Even the value of a visa, a U.S.
Right.
passport, is like just not anything. Really
International soft power comes up a shit ton of these kinds of topics. So if anytime you have a topic that relates to international politics, you should be talking about soft power. If you're not, you fucked up.
Wait, what is soft power?
It's basically bargaining power.
It's also like your views, like not like your straight up power,
Right.
like I got this much military. It's like how do people see your country or like
Yeah.
views, and like for example, like when you think about Canada, it's like nice people.
It's kind of like perception and
Yeah,
resources.
perception
Yeah.
based. So like something you're not doing like U.S. is like not like how do I say, like they're not doing it like themselves. Like, some people are like getting from them. So like U.S. is not spending their time and money trying to like represent themselves. Like people just see it in themselves. Their soft powers, like they're not using their own powers. Like just soft. Like people don't see it.
We just have this persona about us that everyone just automatically thinks that Americans are entitled.
Yeah.
Or,
Fine.
yeah, exactly.
We are pretty entitled.
We're
Yeah.
So continuing to split this up, the other one that we had was these racist, sexist, stuff like that. And that actually has a term, it's called the Trump effect.
Oh, shit.
yes.
Wait, but that's like, are we talking about harms to impeaching him, or are we talking about harms that like he's causing?
Harms in the current system. Like, what problems are we trying to solve?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. 'Cause I thought we were talking. I thought it was kind of like a way to like address the loops in our argument before the opponent does. So
No, there will be times when you do that, but there isn't like a dedicated section to it.
okay, so this is about like the current harms we're talking.
This is really, so there's something in debate called stock issues, and the mnemonic for them is shits, which is kind of why I love talking about stock issues. But one of them is harms, that's the H in shits, and it's basically saying, like, you have to prove that there is a problem worth solving, basically. And stock issues are the kind of thing where, like, if you miss a stock issue, if you lose on a stock issue, you lose the round. So if you fail to prove that there's a problem to solve, then you've lost the round, and that's why we have this harm section. So the Trump effect, basically, racist, sexist, homophobic, what else? Ableist,
Yes.
Liar.
Unapologetic, I don't know. And on, yeah, there you go. To infinity, XXXX, there you go.
Anti-immigrant.
Yeah, anti-immigrant.
So,
It's like, we was like, if we started writing this list, we need a fucking school.
what else did we have in that chaos section?
Public safety.
Public safety. So we're going to kind of fold that into that Trump effect section.
Yeah.
Because part of that Trump effect is how the disposition of the president affects the disposition of the population.
And also division. He's causing
Yes.
division.
Yes.
Division.
Division between like states that like usually more like liberal
Yeah.
states and
Kind of like,
Republican states.
is that called like civil unrest or something?
Yeah.
In a sense, like even like right now, the Supreme Court, like because of now, like I think what Supreme just retired, and so like
yeah, as Supreme Court justice, so he had pretty much he's gonna put in.
so like he has ability
It's
to
like the worst
put it.
after time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like.
Bro.
he
And, like,
might
that
be
same-
probably something he
He
can-
literally that Supreme Court justice supported the immigration bans. Like literally, he's leaving after doing that. And so it's literally like it's like if we see like what is it wrestling, they tap in, so the rest tap in new persons. Like
Well, he's illegally selecting his own defense, so then that way he has more support.
Right.
But he's doing it in a way because he's abusing his authority.
Right. Yeah.
So
Which kind of relates to a harm that you guys are missing, and it's a big one.
speak it.
Use of power.
Almost. It's in
Corruption.
what way is he abusing his power?
Overstep it.
What's that?
Taking advantage. I don't know what's the word.
Overstepping, exploiting.
I will give you a hint. It has to do with a very large foreign country,
Imperialism.
India,
close to China.
Russia?
Russia.
There we go.
What?
Yeah, the Russian collusion.
Well, is that because he was? I mean, that's still, and he also has that. He's still going on, right? The
yeah,
investigation.
because like now they're like, oh, so there was a meeting in Trump Tower. Like,
Going on.
oh, there wasn't. Oh, there is.
Going on.
Plus nepotism.
It's being like.
Oh yeah, nepotism.
Yeah, nepotism because he's using and he's picking unqualified candidates to.
That's
I
why I like
don't think there's a good place for nepotism, and we already have 4 arms, which is also a lot. Plan. How are we going to solve this problem? And so you are fairly constricted in
Yeah,
what your
it is.
plan can be. And by that I mean it has to be the topic. It also can't be something completely unrelated, so we can't be like, we're going to condemn Netanyahu or something like that. We
Okay.
can't do
He
that.
just won again, which is
What
ridiculous.
Yeah.
What about
53%.
holding him accountable for his actions or comparing if somebody else were to get in trouble for what they did similar and comparing that to why he hasn't been brought up on anything yet and why he's still allowed.
We can make that argument, but not in the plan. So in being so constricted, the plan is a very straightforward sort of thing. So the 4 parts are agent, mandate, funding, and enforcement. So the agent is who, the mandate is what, the funding is how, and the enforcement is who's going to oversee all of this, which is also how. We need to work on our language a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like the hardest part about this plan, especially for this topic, is like who's going to oversee it, because like we have
We don't actually need a whole lot. So let me show you what I think the plan here is. Okay. So the agent is going to be U.S. House of Representatives.
Wasn't that kind of also making the assumption that the U.S. House of Representatives want to and or have the influence to get him impeached?
That is a really interesting question. So in debate, we have something called the power of fiat.
Fiat?
Yes,
I think
fiat.
it's I thought-
Kind of like the car.
Fiat. I thought you were going to say the power of thought, and then I was like,
No, the power. We also have that. Hopefully.
like TH.
We have the power of fiat, and it is either, I think it's Latin, and I believe it means let it be or let it be so. And basically what the power of fiat says is that we can make one entity do exactly one thing, right? And we don't have to talk about feasibility, we don't have to talk about probability that it's going to happen, we just say this entity will do this thing. And so the way to think about it is you are creating a separate world, a world apart from this
So
one,
it's kind of like
in
a
which that
hypothetical
happens.
world.
What's that?
It's kind of like a theoretical
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, and that will link into some arguments that we'll talk about later called two worlds analysis. But basically what you're doing is you are creating a hypothetical world in which a thing happens. And you are very constricted in this. It can only be one entity and it can only be one thing. So when we say the U.S. House of Representatives will introduce articles of impeachment, we're not talking about do they have the propensity, are they likely to do so. We're saying we create a world in which this thing happens. So funding, I wrote normal means. That's a phrase you're going to hear a lot, specifically for plans that don't actually require funding.
Just tax.
Yeah, basically. Like, they are already paid to do this kind of thing. And then enforcement is the U.S. Senate, because impeachment proceedings are heard in the U.S. Senate by the Supreme Court, which we should write out there, but we're not going to because we assume people understand how impeachment works. Does that plan make sense? It's very, very simple. and you're not really getting into the why. This is only about the how. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, solvency. How do we solve those problems? And this is actually just one sentence. It's really simple. Reach.
Yeah. He's mentally incompetent to run the United States of America.
And then advantages.
Everything.
Rainbows and sunshine. Yeah.
So I want to be really clear here. These things seem like they're really, really similar, but they're actually very, very different. Okay? So when we're talking about solvency, the only thing we're talking about is how have we solved the problem, right? We're talking about the harms. When we're talking about advantages, on the other hand, we're talking about the extra things that we get. What is it in addition to solving the problems that we get as a result of this? So, for instance, in the nuclear energy one of the problems that we were talking about, so we didn't talk about there being a problem of space exploration, but one of our advantages was space exploration because it's an extra thing that you get on top of it. And that's really, really important. You don't put solvency in here, right? If you put solvency in here, you put it in the wrong place. It always goes up here. Advantages are the extra shit that we get. So what extra shit do we get by impeaching Donald Trump?
Happiness.
So that's solvency again. Close.
Not bad. We get much better, I guess, what is like our trade?
Yeah.
Like,
That's related to what I would say is an advantage, yeah. So I would say international relations.
Yeah.
oh yeah, better.
Yeah. We can implement the Obamacare again, or the medical benefits
Yeah.
that we've lost.
So actually, let's say liberalization.
Yeah.
And basically, this allows to move toward more progressive policies. So can we think of any other advantages, or do we think this is sufficient?
Also, people will be more happy, like the split.
Yeah, there'll be more community,
Yeah.
Maybe peace, civil peace.
Civil peace.
community repair, definitely.
Because, like, after all, like, the shootings, like, people, like,
Yeah.
education, there's so many problems right now. People realize, like, it's not because of Trump, but, like, a lot of it, like, like, he just added
He made it okay
Gas.
to be a racist.
oil to the flame, yeah.
Too.
He brought it
Yeah.
out.
Brought it out more.
He did.
Like, we were moving forward to, like, stepping away, and, like, he probably just pushed us back, like, 20 years.
Oh yeah,
So,
probably
like,
more than that. Yeah.
Yeah. it's just-
So this is all fairly shorthand. If I were actually speaking all of this, I wouldn't just read what's written here and move on. I would expound on exactly what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
But this is generally how you're going to write yours, except in a much smaller amount of space. Do we kind of get the point of advantages versus solvency? Like, does it make sense, the difference between, like, solving the
Yeah.
problem and the extra shit that we get? Okay, because, like, a lot of people like to put their solvency in advantages, and I get that compulsion. I did the same thing. But it's very, very different, and it's easier for judges to judge the round if you keep them separate.
Yeah, and I could see that you wouldn't want to put. I mean, you could say that he's not around to mess up anymore, but you have to really find the advantages even more so than what he did.
Right.
So
Yeah, because the issue with only putting solvency and not having advantages is that basically if they knock down any of your solvency, then you've lost the round, right? Because you've automatically not solved the problem, and that's. So one of the other S's, or one of the S's in shits is solvency. You have to prove that you actually fix the problems you're talking about. So the next step is for you guys to do it, which we have about 15 minutes left. And this is an easy one. The U.S. should abolish capital punishment.
Define capital and punishment.
So actually, you're able to define a phrase.
Capital punishment.
Punish.
Yep, and then abolish probably does need some defining, just because, like, so this is one of the issues with fiat, right? It is considered in the U.S. a state issue to discuss capital punishment. So when we're talking about abolish, we're dealing with the issue of fiat and which specific thing we're going to change. So when we talk about abolish, we have to talk about how we're going to abolish it.
How do you spell fiat, Colton? Is it like the car?
Yeah, FIAT.
Okay. You said it's Latin.
Fiat, it's like pretty much like just let it be like one thing, we'll do one thing.
Okay.
So pretty much saying that we don't have to think about the nuances. It's like this hypothetical
Right.
one thing.
Yeah, and there will be situations where you do have to kind of think about the nuances. So with like the previous topic, we would have to talk about the propensity of the U.S. Senate to vote to remove him from office, right? Because if they don't remove him from office, then the articles of impeachment don't actually solve anything. So at that point, we probably have to talk about feasibility. But we don't have to talk about the feasibility of the House introducing those articles. So that's a key difference that you guys gotta pay close attention to. So go ahead and write that down and write a case.
Yeah, like, what's the format again? Because
I will write it down.
So it's the resolution analysis.
And feel free to ask me questions about structure if you're not sure.
So the resolution analysis is the argument that we're trying to put together.
Close. It's actually it's exactly what it sounds like. You're just analyzing the resolution, and that's where you put your definitions and your weighing mechanism.
The weighing mechanism is like the net benefits thing.
Mhm. Yep, you just basically say judge this round on net benefits in terms of a policy round, yeah.
And then we're just clarifying what abolish capital punishment is.
Mhm. Yep. Resolutional analysis is hard, by the way. It gets much more complicated. Yeah. So this resolution there's some really advanced stuff going on behind the scenes in this resolution, because there is a trap put into this resolution, which is that capital punishment doesn't always mean the death penalty. But
it's also pretty much a big removal of your civil rights, though, correct?
Since there's no way that you guys can account for the fact that capital punishment isn't always the death penalty, talk about it in terms of the death penalty. There's arguments that can be made against that method, but they're too advanced for right now.
yeah, because for the most part, people think about capital punishment. It's usually
Right.
the death penalty.
And that is exactly the argument that I would make.
The problem with that bringing up is like, as you said earlier, it's hard to like really talk about is it on a national level or is it on a state level, because like some states already abolish it, but
Right.
some states still use it, like Texas. I think is Texas still.
I think it's like
Yeah,
here for
Texas
states,
still
it's still,
I think Texas, Oklahoma,
it's usually like in the south.
yeah,
The Southern Belt.
terrible things usually are.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so net benefits would be not dying?
So you don't actually have a section for net benefits. So think about it like normal problem solving. The next one is what problems are we trying to solve, right? Don't get too caught up on the net benefits. That's just a mechanism for the judge.
So would that benefit be like taxpayer money? Like
Mhm.
it costs a lot of money to kill someone.
I think that would be a harm, yeah.
Okay, that would be the harm.
One of
And
them.
there's also psychological stuff like
I think that's a valid harm.
yeah. I mean,
Oh, for the
it's-
people. I was
For,
like,
like, the
the
both,
person's dead. That is not
people, like,
psychological harm.
walking,
Yeah, like
for,
psychological
large society to, like,
ramifications.
know that we, like, that the government should, like, put
Will
to
kill
death.
you, yeah.
Mhm.
So,
How much sovereignty do you really have over your life?
Also consider as a possible harm who is predominantly
Put to death. People of color.
yeah.
Put in prison
There
for
you go.
stupid reasons
Also,
like
like,
marijuana.
Would it be
So
invasion
that'd be
of
like
rights?
mistrust.
Rights of man.
Oh, that could be a thing.
could argue
like
that.
a harm. It would
It's
be like
like
mistrust.
taking the life,
Mm-hmm.
depending
there's
on.
actually a
Falsely
U.S.
being
governmental
accused.
document that sets out one of those
I
rights.
think that could be like the point you make.
Oh, really? It just takes it out.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't remove the right, but it tells us what that right is, and it's the Declaration of like
Oh,
they say in the
yeah,
Declaration
I
of
would
Independence
think,
that
yeah,
one of our
that,
inalienable rights is life.
Liberty,
Yeah.
pursuit of happiness. Yeah.
And so the argument that you run into
Yeah.
is that that isn't a binding document, like it doesn't have force of law behind it,
It's true.
but it does set out the philosophy for the United States, so it's still relevant.
And I was like, a question could you ask? And I'll probably leave them in a stubble because it's definitely like a wedge. It should be like, like do lawmakers have the right to choice on whether some person lives
Mhm.
or doesn't live, because that's such like a wedge issue. Like,
Yeah.
could you bring that up, the topic of the debate? Because I know that it's such a big debate. Like, does someone have the right to choose whether someone lives or dies? But that's not supportive of anything.
Yeah,
Just
and that's
isn't.
why I was going to say I think it's a
Not
good
true.
question, but I think the proper tack is to say that they don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's better
Because
to,
it's a morale issue, and nobody has a right. It's like when you have right now they're telling women that they can't have abortions
Mhm.
because they're telling women what they should be doing with their bodies. And in essence, I mean, nobody should have a right to tell anybody what they're
Right.
supposed to be doing with their own body,
Yeah.
kind of.
And the hope is that you guys have philosophies and theories to back these up. In a better world, you guys would have like laptops and stuff in front of you so you could do the research, or like you would have done the research beforehand. But since this is just kind of like last minute.
honestly, do you think it's fucked up but pretty smart? Because I'm not that religious, but if you bring up religion and these topics, I feel like
It's a bad plan.
Why?
Because a lot of your judges are going to be non-religious.
Christian.
Non-religious.
Fuck it, never mind.
Yeah. Even, I will say, my finals round at nationals, I had 3 judges from religious colleges, and even then I did not make the religious argument.
Yeah, okay. So it's
Because
like,
you could have different, like,
Different denominations, different...
was it also
morals.
kind of looked down upon to bring religion into the
Yes.
mix?
it's
see
like
that.
a weak kind of like it's like when people, it's like
the last
killing
straw. It's the last straw.
out
It's like,
of
wait a
religion.
minute, but
or-
wait,
It's
let's
an
not,
act of
let's not
desperation,
forget about
yeah.
religion. It's like, oh
Yeah.
shit, he got us.
Yeah, there are instances when discussing religion in the speech and debate community is acceptable, specifically in impromptu. Not quite. But not like an impromptu, you would probably bring up religion a little bit, but more from like an analytical standpoint
Okay.
than from making a moral argument.
Okay. Alright. Makes sense.
So if I talk while you guys are writing, am I going to distract you?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So we are 30 minutes past out of time. I would like to do these meetings at least once a week. Does that sound like too much for summer for you guys?
It should be fine. Just not next week though. 'cause
Just not next
July
week?
weekend, but other than that.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Shit. I forgot that was a thing that exists. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll have family till the 17th or
Okay.
18th.
So not next week, and that's fine because that gives me time to put together that example round. And I can send it to you guys, and just as a pseudo meeting, you guys can watch it and try to write down the arguments that I make.
Okay.
I will tell you in preparation for that round, brush up on your UK politics and Brexit.
Brexit?
Brexit. Beautiful.
Brexit.
Love that topic.
How do you spell that?
Brexit. It's basically
Brexit, like it
the
sounds. Okay.
yeah, it's the
Britain.
British exit from the European Union.
Britain thinking that there's some
Is there
sort
any-
of entitled piece of shit out of the European Union. It's like, fuck France, fuck Scotland. We're better than all y'all. We don't need your
Yeah.
help.
You're going to enjoy the example round.
Oh gosh.
Wow. So is there
Yeah.
any books like that you would suggest?
Yeah, is there like a
On Brexit or on debate?
Like a debate book for dummies? No, I'm just kidding.
Um,
No, just like no. Is there any like good books that
There is, or even like online blogs where people
videos?
would.
You don't have any videos?
There's not really. So this is one of the ways in which I'm biased, and one of the few times I'm going to call myself out for it. Everyone else in the nation does debate completely differently from the way the Pacific Northwest does this particular form of debate. They are all doing very rhetorical, very values-oriented debate. When they look at a topic like the U.S. should abolish capital punishment, they don't have the policy structure that we have. They're talking just about the why. They don't talk about the what or the how.
So I mean, like, wouldn't that be stupid because the argument's a lot weaker?
It's
You don't
very
have-
stupid. So, real
It's
quick.
like you can talk about why all the time, but like how are you actually going to affect change if you don't have
Reinforcement
Yeah.
pretty
Right.
loud.
Yeah, so I'm going to show you guys something, and it's a little bit more of an advanced argument, but you guys will need to learn it at some point because it's super important.
I need this in my room.
I know it's pretty cool.
Let's go with this one.
If I put my
It's like
hand ready as
really
possible.
Put about
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mine is as well, and unfortunately the people in the video aren't going to be able to see this. So this is called the trichotomy,
Huh. Okay.
which is kind of a misnomer because trichotomy implies that they're all at odds, when in fact they're not. They contain each other. So there are 3 types of rounds. There is a fact round, a value round, and a policy round. So a fact would be something like, and these are terrible resolutions, you would never see these in rounds. But a fact is something like, pizza is unhealthy. And so basically all you're doing is you're proving a fact, right? You're saying either it is unhealthy or it isn't. It's a binary statement.
Define pizza.
So these are facts, right?
That particular resolution is a fact resolution.
Okay.
So a value resolution asks you to make a value statement. It asks you to compare something against either being good or bad, or against like comparing 2 separate things. So an example value resolution would be unhappy students are preferable to unhealthy students.
Okay.
Right? So you're comparing the value of unhappy students to unhealthy students. And this falls more on a spectrum. It's not a binary. There's not a right or a wrong. So an example policy resolution would be the Department of Education should ban pizza in schools, right? And that's asking you to actually do something. It's asking not just the why, it's asking the what and the how. So if you notice something about these, the value resolution inherently contains the question of the fact resolution, right? So in order to talk about whether unhealthy students are preferable to unhealthy students, you have to talk about whether pizza is unhealthy, right? And that it doesn't directly translate with these resolutions because they're bad resolutions. But you would be talking about whether particular foods are unhealthy, right?
But not all people that eat pizza is unhealthy, though.
True. And that would probably come up in that value round. And then if you notice, the policy round, it inherently contains the questions of the value and the fact, right? In order to talk about whether the Department of Education should ban pizza in schools, first you have to prove that unhealthy students are preferable, or that unhappy students are preferable to unhealthy students, which itself requires proving that pizza is unhealthy, right? So they contain each other. It's called a trichotomy, which makes it sound like they're at odds, but in fact they contain each other.
But couldn't unhappiness contribute to unhealthiness and vice versa?
It could. Yeah, and again, that would be one of the arguments
that could lead to depression and everything else, yeah.
Yeah.
Which leads to overeating or
Right.
making it
Yep.
unhealthy choices.
All arguments that would come up in the value round, as well as that policy round.
Gotcha.
So the interesting thing, and the reason that I'm talking about this, is that the majority of the United States in this format of debate, they turn everything into a value. I don't know why, but that's what they do. So when they see the DOE should ban pizza in schools, they talk about the why, but they don't talk about the what and the how. Right? When they talk about the U.S. should abolish capital punishment, they're talking about the value of capital punishment, they're talking about the value of justice, but they're not talking about how we're going to actually accomplish it or what we're accomplishing. They ignore those details. I come from a school of debate called NPDA, where every single resolution we turn into a policy, which is why I prefer policy. So when we see a resolution like unhappy students are preferable to unhealthy students, immediately I think, let's ban pizza in schools. And then I turn it into a policy. You guys aren't going to do that because it's shitty debate. Like, I'm just going to admit it. When you see a policy round, you'll run it as a policy. When you see a value round, you'll run it as a value round. And when you see a fact round, you're going to strike it because fact rounds suck. Okay? That's all.
How many trophies do you have?
Before we all that, can I talk about my club a little bit?
No.
We have to debate the question.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, so real quick, brush up on UK politics and Brexit. Yes.
Where can I brush up?
I will send
Yeah, right?
videos around.
CNN? I think CNN's pretty good.
CNN,
BBC?
BBC is an excellent source.
British.
So the ones that you want to stay away from are like Fox. Obviously, don't read InfoWars or anything like that.
Snopes is good for fact checking, isn't it?
It is good for fact checking in a casual sense. Don't use it in round though.
Okay.
But the good news is that they tend to cite their sources, so you can check their sources.
Okay.
InfoWars, the energy is like so amazing. Like he has great charisma in the way he speaks.
But yeah, so brush up on your UK politics and Brexit. Does this date and time work for like general?
To the next one.
Does this date and time work in general beyond next week? Like, obviously we can't meet next week because I forgot Independence Day is a thing, but yeah.
Yeah, and I have family coming in from Texas, so.
There was another thing. I forgot what the other thing was. What? Other than
Oh.
that. I will get to that, I promise. It was probably unimportant. Go ahead.
Okay. Like hopefully I'm starting my own club too. It's going to be called Leadership and Personal Development because I feel like right now we are going through a leadership crisis. We can't tell the difference between leadership and management. And we have ideas, but we don't.
I didn't know it was going to do that right now. I thought it was just turning off the projector.
You just scratch your fingernails on the chalkboard.
So I feel like we as everyone have a lot of ideas, but we don't have a lot of we don't know the ways to actually execute the ideas. So that's why I want to like have that club, and because like I said, we're going through a leadership crisis. We don't when we want something to change, we don't like go out and do it ourselves. We just like vote for this person. They're gonna change it, but then it's just like it's somewhat far away. When you want something to change, you want to do it. You need to do it yourself.
Yeah, and we need more of a team mentality, not just so much depending on somebody else to do everything for you.
Yeah.
So.
So